Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of a Noob's Tips for Dungeon Mastering for D&D. In this episode, we're going to look at how you can make custom magical items and how to balance different magical items for player skill and ability. When you get started with D&D, it can be tempting to give amazing and powerful rewards at the end of dungeons or past difficult traps, but doing this can quickly lead to the players becoming more powerful than they should be at their given level, which can make things rather tricky for you. The trick to getting around this is to give the players either a rationed supply of items or items with less powerful abilities still as frequently. Both options will work, but depending on the player group and the type of game you're running, one may be better than the other. If you go with the rationed supply of items, that means you'll be giving out magical items and rare items a bit more rarely, and you want to try and make sure that no player is excluded from the loot though. This plays into something important when you're figuring out the treasure and loot. What does the party need right now, and what do the players like and dislike about their characters or the game system? If you have a barbarian character that's dealing twice the damage as a wizard, then it makes a lot more sense to have like a magical staff drop than a giant two-handed axe. So you got to think those things through. And if your party is lacking something or has a small issue, you can find something around that as well. I have an example of that in my games. I have a friend who's playing a druid. She's the only healer in the group most of the time, so her spell slots are quite quickly used up on just healing people. So I have recently made sure that she managed to receive a Pearl of Power, which restores spell slots to give her a bit of extra versatility going around. A lot of these decisions that you make, come down to how your party build is. So if you're all warriors, then you're going to want some healing items, that sort of thing. The structure and gameplay, and that's more about the players. That's more about personal preference. So if you have a very melee fighter-based group, you may want to either give them a few ranged items to balance things, like some enchanted bows or something like that, or more magical weapons to encourage their melee fighting if that's what the player seems to like. It's something that will vary with each group, so the challenge comes down to you as the DM figuring out which is the best option at the time. Another example I have for this is my group. All the players, bar one, their characters have dark vision, so that one character doesn't have it. So to balance this, the first magic item I ever gave to the group was a ring that can do a basic light spell. So that one guy can now see in the dark just as well as everyone else, although it does lose the stealth aspect. So that's sort of just bringing him up to the same standard as everyone else. And this includes making custom items too. The light ring was made up by myself. It wasn't in the DM book, where it's a good place to start with the DM book so you can have a look at what magical items are in there. But quite a lot of them are a bit too powerful to be given out to your starting adventurers. So my best tip for making magic items, in my opinion, is use the class guides. If your party doesn't have a bard, for example, make a magic item that can perform the bardic inspiration trait once a day, which is to give you an extra dice roll which you can add to your ability scores. Just make an item that can have the trait or ability of another class, as long as it's balanced and you're not giving someone like shapeshifting, unless they really want shapeshifting, then you can do that. You do what you want. It's your game. So you can make these magic items with traits from another class that may be lacking in the group, and the same can be done for spells. So you can also add some low-level spells, such as like maybe the Thorn Whip. Maybe you could drop them a magical whip that acts like the Thorn Whip spell and extends to deal damage. And again, these changes also depend on how you're doing things, because there are 3 types of games. You've got one-off sessions, episodic, and campaigns. One-off sessions are just what they sound. You make a scene, say, guys, make characters to go do this adventure. They make the characters, you go. The episodic is more, okay, you've got your characters. Today you're going to do this dungeon. And then you finish that, and then a couple of weeks later you go, okay, So it's now a few weeks later for your guys and they hear about this bounty. So you're doing different missions without an overall storyline. Or you could have an overall storyline, but it's, not that tied in. And then you have the campaign, which is like, oh my god, the evil dreadlord is overruling the people and you must save the towns one by one. That's a continuous campaign. The main difference with magical items is that in one-offs, you want to give the players their magical items before they get to the end, because there's no point at the end giving them the great magical item that they now can't use. Whereas in the episodic or the campaign, you want to scatter them, make sure they take a while to get them, get used to what their current ones do before you throw in new ones, and let them get used to their classes as well, especially if they're new players at the same time. So my tips for creating magic items in summary: use the player's guide as well as the DM's manual, because the DM's menu does have quite a lot of magic items, and if you are going to use them from there to be starting with, try and look for the uncommon ones. They're a bit less powerful and a bit more realistic in terms of what your characters will get. And if you make them up, try and base them around the other classes' special abilities. Don't make them exact, make them watered down versions so that you don't weaken that class's overall appeal. And finally, if you just want to make simple, really simple bread and butter magical items, just make them increase stats. Just give like a +1 strength amulet, something that increases someone's strength by 1 while they wear it, or a sword that does additional damage when it attacks. Simple things like that. They can be magical. You can just make them non-magical as well. You could have a sword that's just made of a better metal than most other swords, so it does an extra 2 points of damage per hit. Things like that. You can make it simple. You can make it as complicated as you want as well, if you think you and your players can handle it. That's the important thing. You've got to make sure your players can also handle it. So you could make a sword that when it attacks, if you hit something half your height, you will cleave through them to hit an additional enemy. Whatever you want. They're your items at the end of the day. And as long as you and your players are having fun, that is all that matters. So thanks for watching this episode of A Noob's Tricks to Dungeon Mastering. If you have any suggestions on other themes you'd like to hear, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And thank you for listening. Bye.